Like me and many other folks this year, you might have found yourself working from home. And you might have also found that laptop webcams suck. And so you go online and you look for a webcam and you realize,
ouch!
Yeah, webcams are way overpriced right now. So you have a couple options. You could A, deal with your crappy laptop webcam. B, you could buy one of those webcams for way too much. Or C, if you're like me, you could completely go over your budget and buy something like this. This is the Logitech PTZ Pro 2, a 1080p webcam, although it's more tailored towards conference rooms, that can be found for anywhere between $500 and $800. Now, it does offer a massive amount of features over your standard, like monitor mounted webcams, but should you consider paying extra for it? Let's talk about it. This is InnoIso, and this is the PTZ Pro 2 review. PTZ stands for pan, tilt, and zoom, which means this camera can move side to side, up and down, or zoom in and out up to 10 times, which is incredibly impressive. You can think of this more as closer to a security camera that you'd see tracking James Bond in a movie than your more traditional webcam. Let's start with the zoom functionality. You see, 10 times zoom is really more meant for zooming in on the big boss who's sitting at the head of the conference room table at the opposite side of the room. It's not really meant for someone to be able to zoom in when they're sitting at their desk, but it does enable additional functionality because of having this versatility. For example, if you want to set the PTZ Pro up on the other side of the room because there's not enough space on your desk, you can absolutely do that. I've been able to mount the PTZ Pro on the wall on the other side of the room across from my desk, and then set it up and zoom in on my face so it looks like the webcam is a lot closer. Now, obviously this might be a little bit overkill, but it is really cool that you can do that. More practically, the zoom is very excellent for adjusting your frame just a little bit. So if you happen to have a bathroom off in the corner of your shot that you don't want in your frame, you can just punch in a little bit closer and then it will only be zoomed in on you. And unfortunately, this isn't really an option for most webcams, where you actually have to physically move the webcam closer or further away depending on what you want framed. In addition to that, I found that it was always fun to punch in a little bit when I was making a solid point. And although most of my coworkers tended to laugh more often than they tended to be convinced by my point in this case, it did lighten the mood a little bit in what is a very dark period of our lives. Pan and tilt, on the other hand, allow you to change the camera's target, which means that if you're in a big conference room, you can focus on whoever's talking. Obviously, this is a lot less practical from work from home standpoint because there's only typically one person in the room. But what I found is there are actual applications for work from home. For example, if you happen to be working at a whiteboard or something behind your desk and you're walking someone through a point, it's easier to not have to manually adjust your camera in its place or monitor in its place, and instead just use the PTZ's remote to zoom in on what you're pointing at. It's just a little bit more seamless. And I could imagine this would be really valuable for teachers working from home, for example. Now, obviously, the PTZ Pro 2 is going to perform significantly better than your laptop webcam. But let's compare it to something a little bit more comfortable in the Logitech C922X. This is one of Logitech's line of the kind of more classic, typical webcams that you're searching for when you're buying for work from home. This is going for anywhere from $100 to $120 on Amazon, which is obviously a markup from its original MSRP. What I'll do is I'll show you some side-by-side video with the C922X versus the PTZ Pro to show you what the difference in actual quality is. This is an example of a laptop webcam. Now, notably, this is a Surface laptop, so it's pretty middle of the road when it comes to the webcam performance. I have it lifted up probably 8 to 10 inches above my desk, but it's still not at eye level. And so the picture is not as good as it would be if I got a laptop stand and propped it up a little bit more. This is a test of the PTZ Pro 2's camera. Now, notably, the PTZ Pro 2 does not have a built-in microphone, so I'm using the microphone from my C922X webcam, but this is an idea of what it will look like if it's punched into your face. Now, granted, I am pretty zoomed in, so if I zoom out, there is a pretty wide angle that the PTZ Pro 2 can get, and this is from about 3 feet away. Now, I like this versatility, being able to zoom in close or far away.
You don't have that same versatility when you switch to another camera. This is an example of the Logitech C922X, which is mounted on top of my 32-inch monitor. Now, granted, it is very close to my face and it's a natural framing right here, but it's not easy to get it in the perfect position relative to being able to view my monitor in a comfortable position. And so that's the biggest downside that I see versus something like the PTZ Pro, which I can position wherever I want. Now again, I have one LED light coming in from over on the other side of the room, which is lighting this side of my face, and then overhead lighting that's relatively dim.
Now, when you've got the camera pretty close to your face, I don't see a huge difference in quality. I would say that the PTZ Pro 2 is a little bit worse at actually focusing in on your face when you're that close. It searches for focus a lot more, whereas the C922X is a little bit more consistent since it expects you to be so much closer to the screen. Now, of course, the C922 doesn't have the option of pan, tilt, and zoom, but there is some adjustment in the hinge that it sits on. Where I did start to see a significant difference in quality is in low light scenarios, where the PTZ Pro 2's larger sensor typically captured more light than the C922X.
Okay, now I've turned off the overhead light and I just have the LED light in the corner of the room. This is still a relatively dark scene, but the Logitech C922 is still relatively good at picking up details. There's a little bit of graininess that didn't exist before, but it's not too bad. This is the PTZ Pro 2 in dim lighting, and you can see that there's still quite a bit of graininess. Now, when I zoom in or out, there's a few seconds where it tries to capture focus, and so it searches for focus for a little bit longer, though you still do have the option to change framing of your shot. Now, one thing I noticed with the PTZ Pro 2 is sometimes the color profile looks a little off, or the exposure is a little too low. You can adjust that in the Logitech camera application, but unfortunately, some people aren't able to download that application on their work laptop. And so if that's the case, you're stuck with the color profile and the exposure that the camera chooses.
Now, for practical use, I wouldn't recommend that you go out and buy a PTZ Pro camera for your work from home setup unless you specifically have need for the added functionality or the higher quality that you get over a C922X. Of course, there are higher end cameras from Logitech, like the Logitech Brio, which is 4K, whereas the PTZ Pro 2 is only 1080p, which might be a closer battle in terms of quality. I would say that the benefit of the PTZ Pro 2 is the additional functionality that it enables. And while for my own purposes that might not be substantial, I think there are some special use cases, like teachers, that would stand to benefit from the extra functionality offered by the PTZ's pan, tilt, and zoom. Now, obviously it's very expensive for that purpose, but if it's your job, you might stand to benefit enough to make it worth the cost. Thank you for watching InnoIso. I hope you liked this quick look at the PTZ Pro 2 and you came to the conclusion that you probably shouldn't buy it unless you have a specific use case for it. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what you think the best webcam is, and I'll catch you in the next video.